Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club, the show that harmonizes the rhythm of hip hop with the magic of movies. Today we're discussing the 2015 documentary Rubble Kings. We are three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and I've never been in a gang, but I believe MC Hammer when he said we're all in the same gang.
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip hop fan, and I still can't believe that Jim Carrey was one of the main producers of this documentary.
Yes, sir. I'm Boogie, a DJ, longtime hip hop fan, and can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it? I had to, man. They referenced my movie.
The role of Cyrus will be played by Boogie tonight.
Yes, sir.
In this episode, we'll answer the question, how did the violent gang environment of the South Bronx evolve into the beginnings of the world-changing creative movement known as hip-hop? And please hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss an episode.
Ever wonder how hip-hop was actually born? Well, Rubble Kings takes us back to the 1970s in the South Bronx, a neighborhood abandoned by the city, ruled by more than 100 street gangs, engaged in all-out turf wars. After the shocking murder of peace counselor Black Benji in 1971, something remarkable happened. Rival gang leaders met at the historic Hoe Avenue Peace Meeting and decided to put down their weapons. What followed was amazing. Former enemies started throwing block parties instead of punches, and from those streets of transformation came the beats, rhymes, and moves we now call hip-hop. Through incredible archival footage and stories told by the gang members themselves, we witnessed how creativity flourished in the most unlikely place.
And here are 5 things you need to know about Rubble Kings. Number 1, a product of the environment. The 70s South Bronx, plagued by urban decay and government abandonment, had over 100 street gangs with approximately 11,000 members who controlled nearly every neighborhood. Number 2, cinematic influence. The real-life Bronx gangs documented in Rubble Kings directly inspired films like The Warriors. Number 3, the Hoe Avenue Peace Meeting, a historic 1971 gang peace treaty following Black Benji's murder, transformed street battles into block parties. Number 4, the origins of hip-hop. The violent gang culture of the 1970s South Bronx created the breeding ground for hip-hop's birth. And number 5, the 4 elements connection. When territorial violence subsided, gang energy evolved into the 4 elements of hip-hop: DJing, MCing, breaking, and graffiti.
Right on. So, Rubble Kings, wonderful documentary. It really took us back to the street gangs. I didn't know specifically how many gangs there were. As we mentioned in the opening, over 100 street gangs, over 11,000 members. And it was just Wild Wild West, turf wars all over the place. Boogie, what did you take away from, how intense these turf wars were back then in the 70s there?
Yeah, I mean, it was really bad. I mean, the Bronx was almost like walking through a war-torn third world country. I've mentioned this in other documentaries, other recordings that we've done. There was a term, the Bronx is burning. There was, world record number of arsons in the Bronx at the time. In the documentary said it was over 30,000 buildings were burned down in a span of 10 years. Landlords wouldn't provide services. People would move out. Landlords would burn down the buildings, collect insurance. So you got all these war-torn, battered up, beat down buildings all over the neighborhood. So the aesthetic itself was beat up. Now you have the people that are living there, look in the desolate situation. New York City was on the verge of bankruptcy. You got, corrupt cops, corrupt politicians, the rise of heroin in the neighborhoods, the system let the kids down, the services weren't there. So now all these kids, you have all these people that know nothing to do, they resort to crime. And it just overrun the whole city. Like you mentioned, there was over 100 gangs, thousands of members, every section of the Bronx had gangs, and it was like a jigsaw puzzle. You could walk from one turf into another just by walking down the street or walking across the street or crossing where a garbage can or a dumpster is, things like as simple as that. And it was very intense because people became so territorial that if you crossed into their threshold, if you were wearing, the wrong outfit, colors or whatever, you could not, there's a possibility you might not make it out. So it was a very, very intense situation. And I mean, just hearing it from the members themselves in this documentary was eye opening. I mean, I'd had an idea because I've seen, news reports and things of that such, but to actually hearing it coming from the actual people who lived in it was eye opening.
Right on. And the Ghetto Brothers were, primarily featured, and they were great storytellers, right? Benji Melendez, he recounted how just deadly violent it was. It was interesting, the backstory. I like how it was filmed, by the way. They used a little bit of animation and then archival footage. And he was like, Karate Charlie. He just went up to him at one point in the beginning of the show. He's like, I just wanted to, I saw this guy, he looked like a tough guy, and I just extended my hand to him, and he was trying to, get a little bit tense and everything. And then, we became brothers. It was just a brotherhood. And then, that grew, and it grew because they needed something to latch onto. Like you said, the government was failing, the city was failing them. So, and the cops aren't your friends there. They don't have the resources. So it's, you bond amongst each other. And then because you don't have those resources, you fight to claim what you need to get to survive. So yeah, it's just kind of spirals and spirals. I was like, by all the different types and varieties of gangs, based on either ethnicities or families, et cetera, et cetera. But they listed like some of the names. That kept popping off, and I was reporting some of them, and I was just like, wowed by Alley Cats, the Black Spades. Oh, these guys were tough, right? They were just all over the place. Like they would just show up, and then you're surrounded. And the Javelins, the Latin Aces, Latin Kings. I'm sure Renegades, Savage Skulls, and they had different offshoots, the Turbans, and wherever you step, you're in someone's territory.
Right. You said like either you're a member or you're a victim.
Right.
So like wherever you grow up, whatever neighborhood you grow up at, whatever street you grew up in, if there's a gang in that neighborhood, you're either going to join them or you're going to be terrorized and plagued by them. So it's just like one or the other. Flip a coin.
Right.
Now, one thing that really caught me too when they were talking about, the initiations with the Apache line. Yeah. And he was talking about how, they would have to go down the line and have people on both sides, and they would just take jabs at you the whole time down, and then to see if you would make it down. They showed a clip from a movie, great movie, Education of Sonny Carson. And they were talking about the Apache line. That's a pretty tough movie to watch, but it was really good. But they showed that clip and they showed what it would happen. And then one guy was talking about it was Yellow Benji. He was talking about the Ghetto Boys. He said they would play a 45 and you'd have to fight 3 guys as long as the song was playing. I was like, wow, that's a different one. I've never heard that one. And he said his brother went and bought an album because he wanted to see one guy get really beat up, and they ended up playing the whole album and the guy's jaw got broken. I'm like, what the heck? Mm-hmm. It's like crazy stuff. And then Charlie was talking about how the skulls, they had the craziest one that they hear of. It was like you put one bullet in the gun and spin the barrel and then just pull the trigger and hopefully you'll make it. That's crazy.
Yeah. But the backdrop to the 70s, just to go back a little bit, the revolutionary times of the 60s, which was, as they mentioned, an era of social and cultural reckoning, where a lot of these people, they're heroes that were trying to stand up for equal rights. They were all gunned down, right? Malcolm X, MLK, JFK, and they're like, "What's going on?" And then you had the Vietnam War. A lot of people just trying to seek to grab onto something because everything was just in turmoil.
Yeah,
and so it's like, oh, well, now I have this gang. This is what's going to galvanize us, and what I have to look forward to. What's going to keep me afloat, pretty much.
It's crazy. They were talking about how prior to all of this turmoil that occurred in the Bronx, how the Bronx actually had flourishing neighborhoods in it. And I was like, wow, I never really realized that. But they were talking about how the neighborhoods were actually, a lot of the neighborhoods were pretty decent. And then they said Ralph Lauren was actually from the Bronx. I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about when the Cross Bronx Expressway was being constructed, it just made straight lines through entire neighborhoods, just taking down a lot of the nice homes that existed in those neighborhoods. And once that occurred, in sociology, we call it white flight, is when all the wealth or rich people in the neighborhoods start to leave, and then what's left is the poor, and that's kind of what happened in the Bronx. And I was like, wow, that kind of laid it out there.
For sure. So we talked a lot about the environment. Takeaway number 2 is a cinematic influence. So the real life Bronx gangs directly inspired films like The Warriors, which Boogie quoted in his intro.
One of the great cult classics.
Yeah.
This movie is such a guilty pleasure for me. I love it. I sit and I quote the movie, like, in the mannerism through the whole movie. It's crazy. I remember when it used to come on Channel 11 when I was a kid, and I'd watch it. And in school, we'd talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's crazy because there's no way, heck, there was that many gangs in New York. Yes, there were. I did not realize that. And they were just as big as depicted in the film. I mean, granted, they didn't dress as extravagantly as some of the gangs depicted in The Warriors, but yeah, they were everywhere.
The Rubble Kings, a lot of it, like, art imitates life, or life imitates art. So, what really happened here is just kind of spawn the genre of gangs. And now you're talking about gangs on the West Coast that we discussed in some of our other films, etc. So gang violence becomes a big theme in the cinema. But then you have, like, you go back to, like, West Side Story, right? They're talking about gangs, but they're like snapping I always laugh at that one because it's like they're snapping their fingers, but they have knife violence.
It's quite serene comparatively.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like throwback, but Bronx Tale,
sure,
et cetera, et cetera.
Scarface,
so the whole genre. There you go. Yeah.
So yes,
Mm-hmm.
all that feeds into gangster films.
Exactly.
One thing that picked up too, they were talking about that they were drawing some of the similarities with the Warriors, and they were saying that just like in the movie, internet and social media didn't exist back then, but the word got around. Just like in the Warriors, when they were trying to run, they would pinpoint wherever they were via the radio DJ. They said, word got around pretty quickly when something was going to happen, or when there was going to be a throwdown between two gangs, or if a gang, the rumor that something happened and there was going to be retaliation, the word got around pretty quickly. And I said, oh, okay, all right. That whole big meeting in the Bronx with Cyrus, whose quote I quoted in the beginning of the intro, they actually ended up having a big meeting of such. I mean, granted, it was not the same purposes for the Warriors, but to see that something like that actually did happen, where they were able to pull all of the gangs in the area together, it's kind of interesting. I never thought that something like that would ever actually be able to happen. I knew that they did find peace at some point, prior to the emergence of hip hop, really starting to get its root and traction. But to see that, to hear it from the people that were actually there was very interesting.
Yeah, that's a perfect lead into the next takeaway, the Hoe Avenue Peace Meeting in 1971. Fortunately, it was after Black Benji from the Ghetto Brothers gang was murdered. He became a ambassador of peace. So these gangs had like a president, a vice president. They had a whole hierarchy. And then I really admired the Ghetto Brothers were trying to do more than just obviously promote violence and protect themselves. They were trying to, they had a cultural mission and trying to improve the lives. They were helping out with charities and things of that nature. And then they were trying to instill peace. And unfortunately, when Black Benji went out and tried to instill peace, he was murdered. But afterwards, that kind of upset a whole bunch of the other gangs, and it kind of galvanized them. And remarkably enough, the peace treaty was successful. And they agreed to put down their weapons. Their outlet for expression kind of leads into a lot of the elements of hip hop. You see, actually, Africa Bambaataa is featured a lot in the interviews, and DJ Red Alert, and I believe they were both part of the Zulu Nation, right? So as they start adopting hip hop, but even before that, Ghetto Brothers had put out music too. They had an album, and they kind of had a creative outlet and the Latin music. So for takeaway number 4, we're talking about the origins of hip hop, where the gang culture became the breeding ground for the birth of hip hop as the peace treaty took hold, and the creative outlet became rapping over breakbeats and dancing and etc. So that became an outlet, and these crews started like inviting each other to their block parties, and it kind of became a cultural event where we're intermingling, and it's like, all right, we're going to get down with this, almost like the Stop the Violence movement that we would see in the 90s, like kind of took shape.
I think what's great about this film is that we always hear about Cool Herc and Cedric Avenue and the party, but all the things that led into that, you only hear about that when you talk about the 50th anniversary of hip hop. And so those groups coming together is an important part of this history that you don't get to hear so much. So that's why I really enjoyed this film, because hip hop had to start somewhere, and it wasn't just Cool Herc doing what he was doing. There's other things happening, and the inclusion of Africa Bambaataa was really great. He was a member of the Black Spades, which turned into the Zulu Nation, and then you have all these other luminaries of hip hop joining the Zulu Nation. And then no one talks about like when the Zulu Nation sort of broke up, Africa Bambaataa's legal, or at least accusations of troubles. But back in the beginning, I think that what I would like to see more is like the creation of hip hop from the standpoint of like the Zulu Nation, like Black Spades turning from a gang into like a hip hop collective. I think that'd be like the part 2 of this would be really great.
Right. Like what was the conversation like after the peace treaty? Like when you guys left the peace treaty, what was the discussion? Like, how did that go? I want to be in a room when it happened.
Yeah.
like what happened? Like what was that conversation like? And was it just something like where you walked in and you were just talking and a bunch of people were just, brushing you off? Were people just shaking their head yes? Or, was it like a big discussion about it? How did that go? Because we all know, like, to change the course of a group, a collective like that, it's not easy sometimes. We all know that.
Yeah.
Or in this case, it might have been that easy because it might have been like, hey, you know what? Yeah, the Ghetto Brothers were right. Let's do this, and everybody just signed on. I would love to hear how that happened. Yeah.
I always think of Tribe Called Quest when I hear Zulu Nation, because he says that I think it's End of Bugging Out. It's somewhere on Low End Theory, but that just sticks with me, right? Because he shouts out Zulu Nation.
It's so funny though when they had when they had the Spring '99 concert. When I was out on the stage and I had to introduce everybody that was performing, I said, "We got my man Five Dog from the Zulu Nation."
Yeah. He's nice. That's amazing. Love it. But Donna, right? Your point was great. It's like the prequel to the Cedric Avenue birth of hip hop. It wasn't all of a sudden it's a pajama jammy jam back to school for my sister.
Right.
It just popped out of nowhere. Right. There was we had learned in these movies about the Bronx is burning and the landlord, but we didn't know the extent of it until you lift up the covers on this movie, and there's 100 gangs where you cannot step on the wrong turf or you're going to be assaulted.
Right.
It was just total mayhem. People have no idea. A lot of people have no idea. I was thinking New York City, all glamour, a city that never sleeps, all the lights.
At this point now, it's been more than 50 years since New York was like that. We remember it because we were there for that, but
right.
It's not the place. It's like a totally different place now. You couldn't walk down Times Square without like being.
Oh God, no, you couldn't. It's crazy.
One vice or another.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's like Disneyland.
That's right.
Yeah, this generation really they have no idea what it was like to walk through Times Square. I remember like we used to take our school bus trips up to New York to go to the museum, the different museums. And I remember we would come out of the Lincoln Tunnel and hit 42nd Street. And it was just like, what kind of like, and I'm living in Newark at the time, so I'm like, well, what is this? Like, this is crazy. Like the night walkers were everywhere.
Yeah, during the day.
And like, yeah, during the day, like this is like, we're in a school trip, so it's like 9 in the morning. And
Who's
I mean,
that?
it was just dirty,
Yeah.
dirty. But like now, it's like you said, it's like Disneyland and Disney World. It's like, wow, lights everywhere. It's crazy, the transformation. And like I said, I always remember, like I always watched the Warriors, and it's funny because like I reference the Warriors because they referenced it in the movie, but as they're running through the streets, you can clearly see in some places you can tell where they are.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's Union Square. Okay, that's, they're running up, that's Broadway right there. That's okay, yep. And you go by those areas now, it looks completely different.
Yeah. And 50 years isn't a long time.
No, it's really not.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's like, wow.
And it makes me wonder, if we didn't have the South Bronx like it was, and we didn't have the Great Blackout that people got a lot of equipment out of, like what? I feel like hip hop would have evolved anyway, would have come out of somewhere.
Right.
It's just that inevitable, but it would have been totally different if it like originated, I don't know, even in Queensbridge or something, or if it happened to originate in the West Coast. And so these elements are quite unique, or not unique, but this combination of elements to create what we now know as hip hop. Boy, it was an accident almost.
Yeah, the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, what if the Cross Bronx Expressway never got built? You wouldn't have this white flight. You wouldn't have the situation you have in the South Bronx. Like, what? Who knows what hip hop would have come out of? I feel like it would have come out anyway. Maybe it would come out of Queensbridge. Maybe the South Bronx versus Queensbridge beef would have evolved differently. Then Nas may not have been the rapper he was. So the butterfly effect is a little wild here.
Absolutely.
That's true. So then all four elements were present because you had the rapping, you had the DJing, you had the graffiti and the breaking, and kind of like crews of each, right? Pretty much you had collectives and crews. We've seen the dance battles, we've seen the rap battles, just like you just mentioned there between South Bronx.
Definitely not the violence you see, and just like the battles, just rap battles or breaking battles.
Exactly.
Yeah, your crew couldn't exist unless you had somebody in your crew that could do all. You had to have somebody that could do at least one of these things. Each person that can do some. I guess some people could do all of them, but you had to have those representations because just like in the Warriors, when they had a member in their crew that tagged.
Yeah,
you had Rembrandt. They paint the big red W wherever they went. That was their tag. I mean, granted, that was very simplistic of a tag.
Yeah.
Most tags were much more elaborate than a big red W, but evolved into the graffiti artists. Instead of fighting, you do a choreographed moves, imitating fighting, but you're doing it to music. There's your b-boys. The DJ was the guy who was commanding the break beats. And the MC was they talked about it as the president, and the group was the charismatic one, the one who could talk to the people. Yeah. The charismatic one became the MC. That's the one who was getting the crowd hyped up. They could get the crowd to follow along. So you had to have members in your gang turn crew.
Yeah.
And there we have it, all those four elements. It's funny though, we always talk about a fifth element of knowledge being passed along. He said the fifth element was style. And I was like, because you did see a style change.
Yeah.
Yep. Guys went from looking like biker gang members to being a little more flashy, dressing to impress the ladies, He said, the ladies have always been around. Yeah, they've always been around, but now you could talk to women from different areas where you couldn't go before without, have the threat of being chased out. Now you can go talk to that woman over there that lives in another neighborhood, or that black guy go talk to that Puerto Rican, or vice versa, because there's no threat of getting jumped or chased out of the neighborhood now. Yeah. So now the style is changing. I'm like,
That was a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time I think I actually seen a documentary where they specifically pinpointed that moment and changing
Yeah.
to see the evolution of style changing. Because I remember as I was younger, yeah, you see guys and they would, cut off this and cut off that. And then it was like, nah, no more ripped off stuff. You're going to start wearing, flashy stuff, everything's clean and matching. Your hat, your sneakers matching, your shoelaces and your hat are matching, your belt and, your shirt matching. Everything's starting to change up a little bit. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely a divergence between the original look that was like cut off jeans and like you look like rock and roll punks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of studded leather belts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you get this kind of break, and then you get the more refined look, I guess you call it, and you start looking like Kool Moe Dee in 1983 or something.
Yeah.
And less like Joey Ramone. 70.
Right. Like even you think about, Africa Bambaataa in the Soul Sonic Force, how they appeared on stage and then versus like Run DMC.
Yeah, we talked about Run DMC.
They look like the guys from around the way. Yeah, the guys from around the way.
Mm-hmm. Remember Curtis Blow was dressing almost like pimp-like, and then Run DMC was like, all right, the Adidas, the tracksuits, and the hat.
Yeah.
And that became the standard. So yeah, the evolution of style is a good point, Boogie. That's how that is kind of like a fifth element or knowledge, right? They both vie for top billing is another element.
Yeah, there's probably lots of documentaries that need to be made about hip hop style and its evolution.
There are some out there.
Let's get him on the show.
I've come across a couple of them because I know one of them, Walker Wear. I know. Right. Yeah, she pops up in a couple of them.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah. I'm gonna see if I can remember. I'm gonna look for those ones. We can talk about those.
Put that on the list, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they had at I don't know, was that MoMA or some other art museum or the bling.
Oh, that was the Museum of Natural History.
Museum of Natural History, right?
Yeah.
All bling was just all like that was worn by all hip hop artists, just flashiness, etc. Yep.
Last year I went to FIT one afternoon and they had that hip hop clothing exhibition. That was really great.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to put on the list.
Hip hop fashion we could talk.
Amber Walker, that's her name.
Yes.
I was like, I know it's Walker Wear, Amber Walker. I follow her. I've been following her like years since I got on IG.
Right.
But one more point about the four elements. I think
yes,
there's an easy connection you can make between like gang culture, I guess, and graffiti, because even now there's still a stigma attached to graffiti and tagging. Like it's whether you consider it vandalism or not. I mean, that is sort of a gang activity.
Yeah.
But now it's been monetized quite a lot, and it's different now.
Yeah. And even it's crazy though. It's even I know it's seen in my neighborhood with the gangs. Well, I call them fake gangs, but that in the neighborhood. But they actually still tag their areas. Like there's some like right at the corner of my street there. There's some tag there, but it's like it doesn't hold the same weight as if I was walking through the Bronx and saw that tag on the wall and run for cover.
Yeah.
Oh, I got one point.
Yeah.
The song that they kept playing in this movie that I love, absolutely love, is Just Begun by the Jimmy Castor Bunch. Shout out to that song. Oh my God. Every time that song comes on, I want to start dancing.
It's a great song.
I heard it come on. I was like, "Oh, here we go." I'm trying to type notes, and I'm over here rocking with it. Like, oh man,
that was good.
I'm like, yes.
There was good music in this. The score was.
There was some good score. Yeah.
Speaking of shout outs, we wanted to shout out DJ Dynamite for recommending Rubble Kings to us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dynamite. Hope to collab with you again. Let's go around the room and we'll rate Rubble Kings. So Boogie for Rubble Kings, bring that funky flick back. Bring that funky flick back, or leave it in the vault.
Bring that funky flick back, no doubt about it.
Dino, right?
Definitely bring this funky flick back.
It's unanimous. Bring this funky flick back. A lot of historical content.
I'm always amazed by how much archival footage exists.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy to have. You had to have like legit equipment You can't just have like a phone in your pocket. This is 50 years ago.
Yeah. I wish I had come across this earlier. But yeah, I'm glad we reviewed this one.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned in the opening, Jim Carrey was credited as a producer. That's wild.
Yeah,
I think he had seen an early screening of it and then got on board.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he got behind it.
That was so funny. I saw that. I was like, let me go to IMDb. Producer credit. Oh, he really is there.
Fire Marshal Bill. Let me tell you something.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Ace Ventura was behind this one.
Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. Join us on May 28th at the Lower Macungie Library for a screening and panel discussion by us of We Want the Funk, the new documentary from PBS. Go to lowermaclib.org to register. And as always, check out our full live event schedule on our website, hiphopmovieclub.com. Thanks for watching the Hip Hop Movie Club show. Ring the bell so you get notified when we post new content. It's the sound of a power-up for us, so thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more where that came from. Hit the thumbnail, it's about to come on the screen.
And remember, don't hate, graduate. All that time.
It's the time of the year.
That's right. Graduation. Dads and grads.
Get that graduation party lined up.
Yeah. If you need a DJ, hit me up.
Bookings available for graduation parties.
That's right.
Set up.
Right on.
Rumble rap, though.
No rumble rap here. Only good stuff.
Only the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.